What looked like a simple headline was actually something much bigger: a geopolitical message, an industrial signal, and a power move wrapped in one announcement. Donald Trump stepped forward and said a new oil refinery would be built in Brownsville, Texas, with backing tied to India's Reliance Industries. And instantly, the number that exploded across the media was $300 billion. But here's where the story gets more interesting than the headline. According to Reuters, the refinery itself is planned at 168,000 barrels per day, and based on average construction costs for new refining capacity, the project points to something closer to $6.7 billion in physical build cost, not a literal $300 billion check for concrete, steel, and pipes. Reuters also reported that the $300 billion language was tied to how the project was framed around offsetting trade imbalance with India. That distinction matters, because once you understand it, you stop seeing this as just another energy project and start seeing it as a strategic American play. And that is exactly why Texas matters so much here. Brownsville is not just another dot on the map. It sits at one of the most strategically sensitive energy corridors in the United States, a deep-water port on the US-Mexico border, connected to Gulf trade routes and increasingly tied to industrial expansion. According to the Port of Brownsville, the port handled more than 28 million tons of cargo in 2024, the highest in its history. The port says it generated $12 billion in total economic activity in 2023 and supports more than 66,000 jobs statewide. It is also expanding its ship channel from 42 feet to 52 feet, a move designed to handle larger vessels and heavier cargo. So when a refinery is proposed there, this is not a random location. It is a message that America is trying to reinforce industrial depth where trade, energy, and logistics meet. Trump's political framing was clear. He said the refinery would fuel U.S. markets, strengthen national security, boost American energy production, and become the cleanest refinery in the world. Reuters reported that America First Refining, the startup behind the project, said this would be the first new U.S. refinery in half a century designed specifically for American shale oil. That line is crucial. For decades, many Gulf Coast refineries were configured to run heavier, sour crude. But America's shale revolution changed the equation. The United States became a superpower in light, sweet crude production, yet parts of the refining system were still built for an older oil map. So this project is being sold not merely as more capacity, but as capacity aligned with the kind of oil America actually produces at scale. That is where the India angle becomes so powerful. According to Reuters, Trump thanked India and identified Reliance Industries as the backer. Reliance is not some symbolic foreign investor. It runs the Jamnagar complex in India, which the company itself describes as the largest and most complex single-site refinery in the world, with 1.4 million barrels per day of crude processing capacity and one of the highest complexity indexes in the industry. Reuters also noted that Reliance reported roughly $125 billion in revenue last year. In other words, this is not a ceremonial partnership. This is one of the most experienced refining players on Earth getting linked to a strategically branded U.S. project in Texas. That gives the announcement immediate global weight. But the real twist is this. According to Reuters, a global supermajor had provided a 9-figure investment at a 10-figure valuation, and Reliance signed a binding 20-year offtake term sheet to buy the products this refinery would produce. That means the heart of the deal may not be a giant Indian cash dump into U.S. infrastructure on the scale social media imagined. It may be something more sophisticated: strategic capital, long-term product commitments, and a commercial structure that helps lock in viability for a refinery built on American soil. That is a very different story than India gives Texas $300 billion. And in many ways, it is the more important one because it shows how U.S. industrial power can be amplified by foreign capital and long-term demand without surrendering the strategic geography of the asset itself. Now add the bigger market context and the move becomes even more dramatic. According to the U.S. Energy Administration, total U.S. refining capacity stood at 18.4 million barrels per day as of January 1, 2025, essentially flat from the year before. In other words, the United States remains an energy giant, but it has not been adding giant new refining capacity at the pace many people imagine. The Gulf Coast still dominates the refining map. The EIA says the Gulf Coast accounts for 55% of total U.S. refining capacity, and Texas plus Louisiana together account for 49%. Reuters also reported that 8 of the 10 largest U.S. refineries are already on the Gulf Coast. So when a new refinery is proposed there, it's not because the Gulf is weak, it's because the Gulf is still the industrial center of America's hydrocarbon system. And yet, even that does not settle the debate. Reuters quoted analysts who openly questioned whether the United States really needs another Gulf Coast refinery. One analyst said, "Early announcements like this often come with hyperbole." Another suggested that if Brownsville is truly the location, the plant may function more like an export refinery because local demand is limited and Brownsville lacks pipeline connections to move product elsewhere in the domestic market. That is an important warning. It means the public sales pitch is about domestic fuel security, while the commercial logic may still be tied to exports, trade flows, and cross-border logistics. So the genius of the move, if it works, is not that it ignores market reality. It is that it attempts to turn market reality into geopolitical theater. Texas as the stage, India as the validating partner, and energy security as the political brand. The timing also matters. Reuters reported that Trump made the announcement while gasoline prices were under pressure amid war-related energy disruption in the Middle East. Later Reuters reporting said U.S. national average gasoline prices had jumped about $1.06 a gallon, or 36% after the conflict escalated, and Gulf Coast refinery utilization moved above 95%, far above the 5-year seasonal average. That tells you the White House was not operating in a vacuum. In a high-price environment, a refinery announcement becomes more than industrial policy. It becomes political reassurance. It tells voters, investors, and allied partners that the United States intends to answer instability not with retreat, but with more processing power, more domestic leverage, and more visible industrial confidence. Then comes the trade dimension. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative says U.S. goods trade with India totaled $149.4 billion in 2025, while the U.S. goods trade deficit with India reached $58.2 billion, up 27.1% from the prior year. So when Trump and the project backers framed the Brownsville deal as helping offset trade imbalance, they were speaking into a very real political pressure point. India is one of the world's fastest rising major economies and, according to Reuters, the world's 4th largest oil refiner, processing about 5.6 million barrels per day across 23 refineries. India also imports about 90% of its oil, Reuters reported this month, making energy security and supply flexibility core national concerns. Put that together, and you can see why this deal carries symbolic force. A rising Asian power with vast refining and demand expertise becomes tied to a U.S. Gulf Coast project, just as Washington wants to look stronger, not weaker, in energy and trade. So, what is the real discovery here? It is not that India wrote America a $300 billion construction check. It is that Trump turned a refinery announcement into a much larger signal of how the United States wants to operate in the new energy order. Keep the asset in Texas, align it with American shale, wrap it in national security language, bring in a world-class Indian refining giant for capital credibility and long-term offtake, and present the whole thing as proof that America can still attract global industrial partners on terms that appear to strengthen American leverage, American production, and American political messaging all at once. That is the deeper play. Because in the end, this story is not really about one refinery.
It is about whether the United States can use foreign partnership without looking dependent, whether Texas can remain the command center of American energy power, and whether Trump has found a formula that turns global capital into domestic strategic advantage. If that formula works, it does not stop at oil. It moves into petrochemicals, LNG, semiconductors, ports, shipyards, and the hard infrastructure of power itself. So was this just a refinery announcement, or was it a preview of how America plans to win the next industrial decade? Drop your take in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and tell me which side of this story matters more to you: the energy, the trade, or the geopolitical signal behind the deal.